Hi everybody, and thanks for tuning in to Programming Thor with Grant. Just thought I'd take a chance to introduce the series and tell you a little bit about myself and what you can expect to come up in the future. I was born in 1967, which makes me 53 years old. I've had an obsession with electronic music and synthesizers ever since I was a child in the 1970s. I'm Scottish, which means that I'll probably be using a lot of UK English terms. Some of them will be more obvious than others, but hopefully it won't be too much of a problem. One thing that I do tend to do is pronounce Moog as Moog, but I think that's what a lot of British people do as well. So, moving on. Here's a couple of pictures of me as that aforementioned young boy. The one on the left is me at primary school, and the one on the right is me in my bedroom, which I shared with my big brother, and that's me listening to, no doubt, something like Jean-Michel Jarre on the turntable. I decided at quite a young age that I really wanted to get a synthesizer of my own. And so I got a paper round when I was about 12 or 13 years old, and I kept on saving up the money, and eventually I was able to buy myself an EDP Wasp, which you can see here. That was quite a cheap British built synthesizer, but it was very fully featured. It wasn't a toy by any means. And then once I actually graduated from uni and got a proper job, it meant that I could spend all my money on some really nice gear. In this picture you can see an Ensoniq ESQ1 off to my left and a PPG Wave 2.3 in front of me. After my first job I moved to DMA Design, the games company up in Dundee. I worked there from 1995 to 1997 on the very first version of Grand Theft Auto. That's me right at the front in the white jumper. And when I left DMA, I asked Colin Anderson, who was actually the head of the audio department, if he would like to join me and form a band called Under the Dome that would play electronic music. Colin also plays a guitar as well as keyboards, so it was great to have that added dimension to the band. Under the Dome I've had 7 albums in total. The most recent was Almagest, which we released in July of 2020, and a lot of the sounds on that album were generated with Thor, so that's probably the one to listen to if you get a chance. And here's a list of some of the gear that I've owned over the years. So we've got the EDP Wasp, which you saw in that picture earlier on. Then I had a Casio VL Tone and other Casio, sort of Casio Tone type keyboards, the sort of home keyboards that they were producing a lot of in the early 80s. So I had the MT30, the MT40 and the Casio Tone 202, which was a kind of semi-professional model of that series. Later on I got the CZ101, which is a real proper digital polysynth, which is a cracking wee machine. I also had a Roland SH101, and I was very fortunate in the late 80s to be offered a Roland System 100M analog modular system. I got it for the very low price of £250, which is insane when you think about it. The system is probably worth about £3,000 these days. Got a Moog Rogue, which is quite entertaining because I'm sure the Moog company actually called it Rogue so that people would pronounce it correctly, but I insisted on calling it a Moog Rogue. Then we have the Sequential Circuits Pro 1, which was again an absolutely great machine. Very versatile analog monosynth, but it could do almost modular type things because of its modulation routings. The Ensoniq ESQ1 was a fantastic machine. It was a sort of analog digital hybrid. It came out in 1986, I think it was, and it was really the first of the sort of workstation polysynth kind of things. It had a built-in sequencer and you could play multi-timbral parts over different sequences. Really great machine. I had a Yamaha TX7, which is basically a DX7 but without the keyboard on it, so it had all the FM sound generating circuitry exactly the same as a DX7, but you played it using a remote MIDI keyboard. In my case it was the Ensoniq ESQ1 keyboard. Later on, when Colin and myself formed Under the Dome, Colin bought a Yamaha AN1X and I was really blown away with it. It's a virtual analog, but really great sounds and great facilities on it. So I bought one for myself. So we actually had two at one stage. In the early 90s, I managed to find myself a PPG Wave 2.3. Again, it was quite a low price for the machine. It was about 1991 or 92 that I bought it, and it cost me £650. And I think when it was released in the sort of mid 80s, it cost about £3,000 in the UK, so it was quite a decent price for it. But funnily enough, I never really gelled with that machine. And it wasn't until I actually started getting into programming Thor that I really got a handle on the wavetable method of synthesis. So yeah, it was a shame, but it was always a dream machine, but kind of disappointment when I actually owned one. And the last machine there on the list is the Clavia Nord Micromodular. And the Nord modular system is just fantastic. It was able to let me replace all the intricate patches that I'd built up in the System 100M, but it was programmable so that you could recall it for playing live, and the Micromodular formed the backbone of all our live performances from about 2001 onwards. And I've still got two of the boxes just now, because if we ever do play live in the future, then it's an absolute necessity for our sound. So the gear that I currently use on a sort of day-to-day basis is an Alesis QX49 MIDI controller keyboard. So that's just a typical MIDI controller that plugs into the USB socket in my main computer. It's quite a well specified controller. It's got 8 sliders, 8 knobs, and a 4-octave C2C keyboard. I've got the Arturia Mini Brute, but I only use it as a MIDI controller again, and the big difference between it and the QX49 is that the Mini Brute has Aftertouch, which is great for some sounds and not so useful for others. So if I do require Aftertouch, then I plug in the Mini Brute in place of the QX49 and use it. Main software is Reason 11 Intro, but there's no reason why you can't use older versions of Reason for the purposes of programming Thor. I think it was introduced in Reason version 4. So there's absolutely no reason why you can't use an older version of Reason as you're going along in this course. There's nothing, none of the features of Reason 11 are required, like the audio tracks or the VST plugins. In saying that, I do tend to use some VST plugins. I've got the Arturia Soft Synths, one for the Minimoog, or Minimoog, however you want to say it, the ARP Selena String Ensemble, the ARP 2600, and the EMS Synthi AKS. And I also use some free of charge VST plugins that I've just downloaded from various sources. Of course, if you know Reason, then you know that VSTs have to be 64-bit, otherwise you have to indulge in things like using JBridge or whatever, and it's just not something I really want to be bothered with. So just pick only the VSTs that are available in the 64-bit mode for Windows, and that's what I use. So this is what I hope to achieve from this course. Basically, I want to take the frankly intimidating view of the Thor programmer and break it up into different sections and address each of those in turn, so that you can see that it isn't actually a whole sea of knobs and sliders and switches. It actually has a logical flow, and you can break it down into its individual components and look at these in isolation. So I'm going to choose all the different modules at some stage or other. So you can replace all the oscillators, you can use different types of filters, and we're going to be looking at each of them at some point throughout the course. And we'll look at every control which is available to each of these modules, but we'll be concentrating on a minimal subset of those controls at the early stages in the course, just so that you get a feel for how things work. One of the main things that makes the Thor system so powerful is the modulation matrix. It lets you almost work with it as if it was a modular synthesizer, because you can pretty much patch anything to anything else via the modulation matrix. And again, it's a bit overwhelming when you initially have a look at it, but it's very logical, and if you do simple examples and build up from there, it all becomes very understandable. And hopefully I'll be able to help you understand how to tweak existing patches which are available for Thor, either the ones that come delivered with Reason or ones that you've bought in a refill pack or whatever. And it'll let you analyse what goes into making that sound the way it is, and hopefully you'll be able to identify fairly quickly what you need to change in order to change the sound for your own purposes. And also, it'd be great if at the end of the course you're able to just think of a sound and get down and just have a bash at programming it yourself from scratch. So there we go. So who's the course aimed at? Well, basically everyone. If you've got an interest at all in programming Thor, then I'm sure there'll be something in here that you'll find interesting. Firstly, I'm aiming at complete beginners. That's people that have never programmed a synth of any kind at all in their their past. They've only used presets. Absolutely nothing wrong with that approach, but if you actually want to attempt to get the sounds that you've got in your mind and create them on a synth, then knowing all these techniques will get you much closer to doing that. So first of all, I wanted to get a course which complete beginners could come to and pick up tips about what makes up a synthesizer, what makes up a sound, and how you can change all the parameters of a synth sound in order to get the sound that you've got in your head. Also, I think the course will be useful for people who understand synth technology but have maybe got a wee bit out of touch with it and want a bit of a refresher course on it. Also, people that have got lots of experience of synth programming. There's people that have been programming synths for decades, but they might not be aware of all of the specific features of Thor. So hopefully this will give you a bit of an overview of what's available in Thor and what makes it such a powerful synthesizer. And again, people might want to tweak the Thor presets that they've got in order to get closer to the sound that they actually require. Here are some of the things that I'm not intending to do in the course. So firstly, I'm not intending to teach music in any shape or form. Every now and then I will have to throw in a musical term, but I'll try my best to explain what that means in terms of synthesizers rather than in musical terms. I mean, there's plenty of people out there on YouTube who do fantastic courses on music, people like Rick Beato, Adam Neely and so on. So if you're interested in music, then there's plenty of resources out there for you, but this course is not going to teach you anything about music. I'm also going to try and limit the number of physics and electronics terms that I use, but every now and then it will be necessary to actually throw in a term like frequency or harmonics or things like that, but I'll try my best to explain what it means at the time, and I'll also try and provide links so that you can do a bit of research by yourself on these terms. Again, I'm not going to try and teach you techniques of actually playing the keyboard. I'm not a great player by myself, I'll admit that freely. I've been playing keyboards for several decades, but really, as I say, I'm just at the stage of enthusiastic hobbyist, not a virtuoso by any means, and I can't sight read music. It just looks like lines and dots to me. Can't make any sense of it. And finally, I don't have any connection with Reason Studios. I'm just a big fan of Reason, particularly the latest version, which has got the audio and VST capabilities. And Thor is just the best synth I've ever used, bar none. It's fantastic, and just wanted to let people know about it and share my enthusiasm for it. So that's me. That's your introduction to myself and to what to expect from the course. See if it's for you, and hopefully I'll see you next time. So thanks for dropping in.